The display we have here is called The History of the Future, The Road to Autonomy. And basically what we are showing, and you'll see it later as we go through each car individually, is different technologies that automated portions of the driving experience, and also things like the Firebird behind me, which are autonomous concepts for the future, and also vehicles that actually had the original technologies that became the backbone of autonomy. So there's a lot going on here. It's a very interesting display, so let's go through it. So as you probably notice, the Detroit Electric is actually chronologically out of order, but it's actually here to represent the heyday of electrical cars, or the early heyday of electrical cars, and that was in around 1900. And at that point, about 30% of all cars in major cities were electric. The electric car was particularly convenient for women who had trouble turning the crank, or anyone else who didn't have the strength to turn a crank. And if we move on to the next car, this is the 1912 Cadillac Model 30, and this is the car that has no crank. This is the car that really killed the electric car. Because with this car, you married the electric with the internal combustion engine, and all of a sudden you had the best of both worlds. Women could drive this car, people who couldn't turn a crank could drive this car, because it was just to turn it on and get going. This was automating something the driver would normally have to do. In that sense, kind of playing into this history of automating portions of the driving experience. Now we find ourselves in 1916 with the SCRIPPS booth Model C, and the reason that this car is here is it actually has speed control on it, so it's a very early form of cruise control. That technology didn't originate with this car, it actually originated in 1904 with a car called the Wilson Pilcher out of the UK. They called it a speed governor. At the time it was very cumbersome to maintain your speed over long distances, so this was a way that you could actually set the speed on the car, take your feet off the pedals, relax for a little while before you needed to control the car again. The speed was controlled by a knob that was on the steering column, and you could actually release that speed control by tapping the brakes, similar to how cruise control works.
Well, I found a new place to dwell. Well, it's down at the end of Lonely Street, that Heartbreak Hotel.
So here we find ourselves in the mid-century with the Firebird 2, and this is a really interesting car for the history of autonomy, because the Firebird 2, in addition to being a gas turbine car that sort of looks like a jet without wings, it's actually a concept for autonomy. And so this particular concept was the car would be guided by a wire that was embedded in the roadway. It would send electrical impulses up to the car, and it would guide the car where it needed to go. And in order to accomplish this, as you can see in the videos that are playing behind me, you actually would, if you were the driver, you would call up a control tower, you would tell them where you wanted to go, they would set in your route, they'd guide you to a strip in the roadway, you would get yourself over the strip, they'd lock you in place, and then the strip would guide you the rest of the way. You could get rid of the steering wheel and you could do whatever you like until you reached your destination. Interestingly, they took this concept a little further in their concept video, or concept film, and it goes all the way to the man in the control tower who they talk to actually becomes a concierge near the end of the film. He books them a hotel, he guides them to the actual hotel, and essentially he becomes a precursor to OnStar. And keep in mind, this was in 1956.
We're all set for auto control.
Behind me you'll see the Cadillac VOYAGE concept, and the reason that it's on this display is that one of the major components of autonomy is navigation, real-time tracking, and GPS. Now this car doesn't have GPS, it's from 1988, which is sort of predates the GPS movement, but what it does have, it has a concept for real-time tracking with color maps that are embedded in the dash and the whole deal. So the tracking here on this car is actually based on an inertial tracking system called ETAC, but it was a full kind of concept for that in the future we would have tracking in our cars, real-time navigation and tracking. Behind me you can see the 79 Cadillac Seville, and this is here because the 78 Seville, which looked almost the same, was actually the first car with a microprocessor in it. So this is to show how computing technology advanced. Now the first car with a computer in it that is the first agreed upon would be the actual 1968 model year of Volkswagen. They put computers on their cars. This one had a microprocessor in the trip computer. It was actually one of the first cars, or if not the first car, with a trip computer as well.
Come on, baby, let's do that twist. Come on, baby.
Behind me is a 1960 Eldorado, actually. The 1960 Eldorado, it was the Cadillac family of cars in 1960 had cruise control on them. The first car with cruise control was the 1958 Chrysler Imperial, and this was sort of the second car with cruise control. And cruise control, as you may know, is really the backbone, one of the backbones of modern autonomy. It's this idea that we are actually currently building out the cruise control system to control more functions of the car and more functionality in the driving experience.
Clap along if you feel like a room without.
So behind me here you can see the ENV from it's actually the ENV 2.0 from 2014. This car was built specifically to solve mobility problems in China. And it's an electric networked vehicle, that's what ENV stands for. And the idea was that you would have a vehicle that was low cost, probably due mostly to its size and manufacturing. It was, it used electricity, so it did not pollute the environment, and it was networked, so it could actually drive autonomously as well. The car doesn't really get up to a high speed, but it's designed specifically for urban mobility in order to solve these problems of congestion and pollution that they have in the cities in China.
I hope you enjoyed this video from CADILLAC Video.